at some point it became a choice between should I go deeper in chess or should I look at an alternate career. Luckily, I didn't have to pursue that problem very much because I was very successful, but at the right time also. So when I would have been choosing an alternate subject, I became national champion. When I would
Yeah.
have chosen a university, I became a grandmaster. And by the time I finished my university course, I got my first degree. I was a top 10 player. And then when you're a top 10 player, you think, okay, now I'm safe. This can be my profession. And you don't have to change your mind. And that was a big relief.
Yeah. And so Richard, one of our members of uh, there's a high gifted association called Mentor. It's an
Mhm.
international association. And Richard, so I put this interview into the groups and I asked if someone has questions. And Richard asked me what training methods and tools can help people in principle or anyone to improve in chess.
I think the main way you get better in chess is simply by playing it often. It is one of those things. It's a bit like perhaps music.
Yeah,
You can read music, but you don't really become a better musician till you play your instrument over and over, or you sing over and over. You train those habits. I think it's very similar in chess. Even I would describe chess also as a language. It has a lot of the traits of language, which is that. Just like languages, children pick up chess very fast. So people are constantly surprised that someone young is very good, but in fact, I think it's easier to become strong in chess when you're young than when you're older. In the same way that it's easier to pick up a language when you're 2 years old. I mean, many 2-year-olds can be easily bilingual or trilingual, but later it becomes much harder. Maybe a different part of the brain is involved. So it's regular practice, and but eventually you need to learn because not everything you can experience yourself. And we're talking millions of games have been played, lots of things you can't hope to do everything yourself, so you try to learn from other people's games. What are the principles you absorb, what are the and again, just like a language, uh, a good player doesn't go to the board and think I must do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the same way that you and me do not speak a language by thinking I need a verb, I need a noun, I need a preposition and thing. You just say
yeah,
the words, they come out.
yeah.
We learn to play chess in exactly the same way. Um, which is why quite often if you ask me why I play a move, I'm not completely sure myself. It just pops into my head and then I play it, but it's a result of all those years of training.
Okay. And what do you think? What makes a good coach? What is the best way to teach chess? And how does the acquisition of chess skills actually work?
um, Teaching chess, as I mentioned, is much harder because you actually have to break down a process. It's again, to use the language analogy. I'm sorry to do it again, but I would say it's very similar. As a teacher, you have to explain structure. You have to explain why certain words are right. But the student will learn it um, by practice. So you try to find the right examples. You try to find. Sometimes a teacher is not so much teaching chess as demonstrating how they learned the game. And so you learn from, oh, this is what you did when you were young, and in this situation, that's what you did when you had a good position, but your opponent was not confident. You did this, and situation by situation, you get an understanding, and it combines a little bit of psychology, a little bit of chess, things like that. Um, and of course, there are methods. There are certain number of patterns that you show exercises, you show famous games, because again, you see things that other people have learned from these games, a common heritage of chess. And just encourage the student to learn. But I think just like teaching, uh, you present the material, but each student will absorb it in their own way.
Yeah, that's right. And Mr. Tornaritis, who invited me to the chess competition in Cap Saint-Georges, and who is also the president of the Chess Federation here in Cyprus, he has the idea to introduce chess as a school subject. What do you think about this? Do you think this could help, for example, foster political foresight? Because that's my opinion, that chess is also helping to think in a longer term.
Okay, I think first of all, the idea to have chess in school is an excellent idea.
Yeah.
There are still different opinions on whether it should be compulsory, should be an exam, and so on. But I think having the opportunity to learn chess in school is one of the best things you can have. Because what do you learn when you play chess? You learn how to
manage an enterprise, in fact. in my opinion, it has to do a lot with enterprise, with political decisions, because it's always a lot of things in to think about.
That is true, but you learn first of all that moves have consequences. So the first thing you learn as a chess player is you cannot take back a move. You make a move, if something is wrong with it, you have to live with it. That's different, because most people who play chess, they play it at home, where you can, oh, I'm sorry, I take it back, I try something else. But you learn that discipline, and it becomes something that is really drilled into your head. You learn to think that your opponent will make the best move. It's a trait of youngsters, perhaps with even children, that if you play a game, you think, I might get lucky, I'll do this and maybe I'll get lucky and my opponent will be there. But you train yourself eventually, no, my opponent will make the best move. So if I play this, what is the best move my opponent can make? Can I resist that? And you think through the consequences and play it. Later on, you learn other skills. As you read lots of games and learn to recall them at the right moment, you train your memory. You train yourself to actually sit and focus on a problem without being distracted by other things.
Yeah.
Because again, you come back to rule one, you cannot take back a move. So you have to work. So these kinds of healthy training skills and all, you can learn. Now, I think this can be achieved with maybe 3 hours a week of chess. So this is just a healthy game to train these thinking habits. Beyond that, I think you can become a strong chess player, but it's not. For instance, I think that if you train 3 or 4 hours a week, you will do better at school. You'll learn skills that you can apply in other areas. But if you do 10 hours of chess, then you'll become a better chess player. This is the rough difference.
Yes, of course.
As to your broader point, I don't think that chess is going to do much harm, but whether it teaches you much about politics, I am skeptical, because chess is it's a metaphor for life, but a certain kind of life. You are learning what is a strict rule-based environment, a very controlled space, where all the information is on the table. There is no information that I hold that my opponent cannot figure out by looking at the pieces. The information I have is what the pieces are telling me, not what I am or what the board is telling me. There is nothing I can keep for myself. My opponent can read the same information, can find out what's the best move on the chessboard, and he cannot keep it from me. So it's a game with very controlled rules. Life doesn't mimic that. First of all, in politics, expecting everyone else to follow the rules is probably a career-ending move. And there's much more unpredictability. So I think chess trains certain things. And also, as I mentioned again, when we play chess, we play it quite impulsively. We play it with our personality. We don't play it with our brain necessarily. Your thinking methods become faster and faster. They become more efficient. But that doesn't mean you're applying them at every moment. You do things because they come to you automatically. And again, in life, if we are trying to say that people in other walks of life people who run an enterprise, I think the big difference for people who run an enterprise is that my pieces do whatever I tell them to do, and your employees will not. You will have to motivate them, you will have to understand them, you will have to compete for their attention. I mean, there's a lot of give and take. Human resource management is a specialized field, but in chess it's fairly simple. the
Yeah.
pieces the pieces go where you tell them to go. So there are some things which cross over. I'm not sure everything crosses over.
Okay. But that's an interesting exchange of ideas.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And so, to know a little bit more again about your childhood, uh, um, so it's also a little bit more focused on my topics about neurodivergent people. So I don't know if you are a neurodivergent person, but I know that a lot of persons in the chess community are thinking a little bit different than the normality, than the normal people. So when did you first realize that you were different from other children when it came to thinking or learning? Or did you ever realize this? Perhaps it was you were always thinking, no, I'm completely normal like all the others.
I don't think there's a huge divergence. I mean, when I went to school, I could relate to the others, though they were interested in many things. But I was interested in one more thing, which was chess, and they were not. More to the point, um, there was something in my brain which was constantly thinking of a chess position at the same time. Generally, you'll find that many chess playing kids are a bit quieter because they uh, tend to be focused on something at the board or thinking about something. I mean,
Yeah,
chess is a game which absorbs you very much.
yeah,
You once you start thinking about it, it's sitting in your head all the time. If there's some unfinished problem, you can't get on with life till you have solved that. These kinds of things. Um, I wouldn't have heard of neurodivergence when I was young. I doubt it. I wouldn't have stumbled on that literature. Funnily enough, I stumbled on the Mensa Society in when I was in school. Not in school, but there was a magazine I opened and they had a Mensa quiz, and that was quite popular in those days. You would find them; they would give these Mensa quizzes once in a while, and basically testing your lateral thinking and your ability to solve a problem creatively, things
yes.
like that. You would have these problems which required you to think a little bit out of the box to solve, and I did a few of those, so I was aware of that. Um, and I think I don't have the confidence to say that all chess players are neurodivergent. And it's not an easy label to pin without some training. But I'm pretty confident chess attracts a lot of neurodivergent people. So
Yeah,
not
that
all of
is,
them are, but the other way it works.
yeah.
Um, and now I start to recognize some traits at least. And I think, yes, of course, I had them. So it could well be that I was at least partially neurodivergent.
Yeah. And I mean, I
Some things,
see,
some things came easily, some things never came. So the ingredients are there, but um, I don't know enough about the subject to be very confident about it, to be honest.
yeah. I mean, I see it now with the creativity. So after my motorbike accident here with the broken
Mhm.
collarbones, I also had to get very creative because I can use the hand now till here, but I can't go higher.
Mhm.
Um, and I have to learn a lot of things. I have to train it again. And for example, I can't do my own
Uh-huh.
things here. I can't get out of my t-shirt anymore because I can't go there.
I'm sorry. I hope it gets better fast. But anyway.
So there it helped me also a lot of being creative because, for example, I was putting this arm in between of two doors, and then I was trying to get out. So sometimes I always see that being creative, it helps me in a lot of way. So what do you think about your life? Where did it help you to be creative?
Well, it just helped me to be creative.
Not only in chess, I mean in your life. So
Yeah, but how did I apply chess in that sense? Um, I think I had the habit of assuming that so um, I'm not someone who gambles often because I suspect that my normal attitude to life is my opponent will probably make a very good decent move at least, so they won't play the worst thing.
yeah,
Uh, I The other things are harder to pin down. I have a pretty good memory for certain things, but again, it's a memory which memory is very good when I'm interested in something. It's not at all when I'm uninterested. I can't focus on the problem at all. That's a trait maybe, um, and I can see influences. But it's hard to pin down when you think that being a chess player helped you make a better decision. That's very hard to pin down because there are so many variables involved and so on. And of course, I think you have to study this a bit
so
more closely.
you don't think it helps you to take better decision in life to train chess?
I think it probably does, but it's when I look at a decision, there's so many inputs that I don't know. I cannot say. You can see the chess part made that decisive tiebreaker. Let's say it didn't. I couldn't nail it down like that. Um, and there are fascinating experiments. But as I said, being a professional player and the benefits you get from chess, they split apart very early.
Yeah,
So if you want to be a good mathematician, you can play 1 hour, 2 hours of chess a week. But if you play 10 hours of chess a week, you'll be a good chess player, not a good mathematician. You need
yeah,
to spend time on the subject, and you need to develop an understanding, a familiarity with the subject, that your brain gets more and more efficient doing it, and you get faster and faster.
yeah,
That expertise is the same everywhere. Whatever walk of life you are in, you can super specialize and become good at something. Or, but I can't off the top of my head to tell you when I think a chess trait helped me
in your life.
in my life. Um, I see some patterns not necessarily related to chess, but for instance, I chess players normally are supposed to have good spatial skill and all.
Yeah,
And there are certain games we play very well. But again, chess and games connect because it's limited space, predictable rules, controlled environment. Those kinds of situations are not what you stumble on in everyday life.
yeah. Okay. Um, and when did you start to think about doing chess as a profession? Because normally people are starting because it's a hobby, not of getting money from it. So
The thing about chess is you do get addicted to it. And there's a time when you a lot of who you are comes from the chessboard. You think, what's my rating? What's my ranking?
yes,
If it goes up and it's published, you feel good about yourself for a few days and you feel that you've gone higher.
yeah,
Um, when it goes lower, you feel a bit like you've lost track and you need to correct your life and come back.
yeah,
It's only a game, but it starts to mean a lot. And I think many chess players struggle to leave it. Um, if you could, if you could play chess for a living, then many people would.
yeah,
But as I mentioned, I was not lucky. I mean, I got good, but at the same time, lucky with the timing. Um, at the moments when I would have hesitated and wondered whether chess was the correct career or I should do something else, I had very good chess results. And then you feel reassured much faster.
wow,
So, in that sense, I was lucky that I didn't have these moments of doubt and any worries about in which direction my life was heading or anything like that. And for me, the decision to become a chess player or to commit to where I already was came quite easily.
Yeah, cool. And as a child or teenager, were there periods when things became too easy or too boring for you? I mean, not only in chess, but in your life. So, do you remember, those situations when you got a little bit bored by other people or by some topics also?
Quite often, unfortunately, because it is one of the reasons that sometimes chess players can come off a bit aloof in
Yeah,
social situations. Uh, I mean, chess players are fine with other people who understand them and who understand that they can be distracted. Also, it's not unique to chess players. I see many doctors who have the same trait. I see many people in highly specialized intellectual fields who have the same trait. That if they're thinking of something in that work, it doesn't, part of their brain is locked away and they can't focus on a conversation. They can't just do idle talk. It needs to be engaged. These are traits that you see quite often.
I mean, for example, small talk is for me very boring. It's not very. I like to speak with the people directly about sense of their life and those things, but not how's the weather. So how
Yes,
is
small talk is a difficult skill to learn. I've gotten better at it um, because I've had to face that situation often. So also, it may not be that it's a kind of divergence from others. It's just that social skills, training to be in social situations is a skill like anything else, and it can be practiced like anything else. I mean, if that, I became much better at that. I mean, when I was young, I would go to someone's house and just be thinking of chess all the time. My parents would be talking to them, and it was fine. And then they would say, "Let's go home," and I'd come home. And you pass under the radar because nobody actually confronts you and says, "Hey, why aren't you talking?" And you think, or maybe they think, "Oh, he's a chess player, a kind of genius, whatever," and then they leave you alone. So it's there, but my social skills have improved now. I know that it's a problem, so I will when I go going somewhere, I will try to quickly brush up on some topics which will be of interest to people who are there. And I've learned to be interested in. I mean, I read a fair amount, and so I have enough conversational starting points that you can hold a conversation thing.
so you think
But these are skills in managing social situations, which are again different from really having real expertise. I mean, we've all read these funny books, right, which tell you how to be wonderful at cocktail parties, which is just to know how say something clever with a clever title,
yeah
say it confidently, and move on to the next. And nobody knows that you're not a PhD in every subject. But so social training is only about that part. It's about faking it. You don't actually have to be an expert in the subject. And I can have conversation about a subject or pretend to be interested.
yeah
But finally, what stays in my head is only what I found interesting, and that is a very strong chess playing trait.
yeah
Um, it's a trait also in artists and all. I mean, I have a 15-year-old son, and he's also got this intense ability to concentrate on art, which is his passion. He's a painter. He is exhibiting in a few cities and the thing, but he is very interested, and when he's thinking about something, he's thinking about how to do it and exchange art for chess, and that's how I used to be. So you see some similarities, but at the same time, I think many every skill in a sense can be practiced and trained. You can
yeah
train your social skills, you can train your ability to deal with the media, you can train your ability to some degree. Being a sports person, you're forced to learn that second skill, which is how to
yeah
communicate your viewpoint to the media and so on.
I mean I
Almost
think
everything is a skill that you learn, and so even social skills are uh, just that, they're skills, you can learn them.
I mean, it depends because I mean, for example, me as a autistic child, I learned a lot from my therapist. She teach me a lot, but I think as an artist person, there are also some things that you can't learn. But you think so in your childhood, from your childhood till now, you improved your social skills?
Yes, definitely. I became more confident in social situations because I was being exposed to it constantly.
Yeah.
And if you have to deal with people and you have to learn how to talk to them, then you can't indulge yourself too much. So, when I'm in a public place and I'm talking to people, I um, pay attention. I do it enthusiastically? I don't know, but I go through the motions and then I come home.
And
In a
what?
sense, we all don't examine each other too closely, right?
Yeah.
So
But
maybe
what?
maybe the other person is also not interested in the conversation, but everyone's trying to make social constraints.
And what do you think? What? Where did you learn more social skills?
Traveling is an excellent place. I think being confronted with other cultures. Um, so these are other cultures. I think is the strongest training method because you're learning with people who might do something that you think is rude, and then you realize in their culture it's not rude. You have to make these adaptations. I I feel strongly that's where it came from. Um, but if you ask me to describe the process, I can't do it. But I think um, cultural differences. I mean, even simple things. People asking you, for instance, would you like an extra helping of something uh, in their house, for instance, and you say, in certain cultures, saying yes, and they will bring more and give it to you. In certain cultures, they expect you to say no and they'll say thank you. And if you say yes, they don't know what to do. So, these kinds of situations are very interesting because you cannot compress them. What is perfectly acceptable in their society might be considered rude in yours. What might be considered an invasion of privacy in your culture might be normal in others. And you have to get used to these dualities. I think that is the best social training. Then the thing of simple rules. If you want to be interested in, if you want to be if you want other people to be interested in what you say, you should be interested in what they say first. Simple rules like that. But it's not. You can get better at it, and I don't think there's anyone for whom it's hopeless. I mean, there are always a few absolute geniuses who are off the charts and they are only focused on their work and so on. But it's much less than I think, and I don't think it correlates precisely with chess playing. Though the other way around works. Maybe chess attracts them as well.
Yeah.
That's possible, but I don't think it's a predictor.
Yeah. Um, and were there times when you doubted yourself, even though from the outside you appeared very successful?
Very often, because you have two things processes going on in your head. One is um, your relative position amongst your peers. So you may feel that you're getting weaker than other chess players in some areas, that you're falling behind. And that is internal. The outside world doesn't see it till the results show it. So then you will have this funny situation where the outside world might think you're very successful, but you don't feel secure because you know that amongst the experts, amongst the people for whom expertise in the board or in your field is the main thing, you're falling behind, and you may have a sense. Now, again, the next question is: Are you falling? Are you really falling behind?
Yeah.
It does a technical examination show it, or are
Yeah.
you losing confidence? And so there are various ways of doing this, but this is I think, certain amount of self doubt and social anxiety is normal.
Yeah.
It's part of, maybe the flip side is that you feel successful at the other end, but I think it's a fairly normal thing. And if you learn some ways to manage it as well, if you feel you're falling behind, take a month's rest, let the hunger for the game come back, and then come back and work and make up. You can also accept results that are fair. If somebody you think deserved it more, then accept it and try to do better next time.
Yeah.
Um, Coming to terms with your defeats, all these are skills that you can learn from the game, and it helps you cope with these things.
from the games, you think. Okay, you can learn it from the games. That's interesting.
In a sense, because you lose in chess. I've lost hundreds of games and I won hundreds of games. Each time I
Yeah,
lost, I learned a small lesson: not to do this, not to do that, not to do this. So the game also drives you down a path when you're learning a very valuable skill. And by the time you're losing the 50th or the 100th game, you've maybe you don't realize it, but you're actually changing your way of doing, moving the pieces or taking decisions, and that's part of growing.
yeah. And is there anything in your life story that most people would never expect from a world champion like you?
That's a tough one to um, say. I What I have noticed the most is that people seem very surprised that I do normal things, or I'm uh, or I'm seen in everyday places. I think it's just that they see you always sitting in front of a board or
Yeah, yeah,
receiving a trophy or something, and they at some point they forget you can go for a walk or you can go to the store and buy something. And
yeah.
you know,
You have also a normal
they
life.
seem surprised, but if they stopped and thought about it for 5 minutes, they would understand. Hey, of course that's normal. I mean, he also has to live, but that can shock people. So
That's funny. Um, and were you sort of person who quickly grasped what was going on and then grew impatient when others were slower? How did you deal with this?
uh, I had to learn to control. So it's a very nice question, because when I was young, I was impatient when other people wouldn't play as fast as me, because for
Yeah,
me it was obvious. But some point you learn that, well, they have the right to choose, and as long as the rules give them time, there's nothing you can do.
yeah,
And later on, I think you realize, wait, in the desire to always play fast, and are there things I'm overlooking? And if you force yourself a bit harder, you realize there are things you're not seeing, and you need to slow down and force yourself to think creatively, laterally, however you want to put it, and find moves that you don't automatically find. So everything can be squeezed as through a learning lens, but yes, of course. If I'm talking about chess to somebody who can barely follow it, it's getting unpleasant for both of us. I think they're thinking wise, and this is a very interesting problem, because when you try to explain chess, when you try to be a commentator,
yeah,
I mean, I think you spoke to Maurice last week, right? If you speak to, I mean, someone like Maurice, he has learned how to explain the game to people who are only watching casually,
yeah,
without scaring them too much,
yeah,
scaring them through the game. I mean, what you want to communicate is, it was a difficult position. Here's what happened. Keep it simple, and bring them in. And that's a skill, not trying to show off. When you're trying to communicate your game, you're not trying to show off how much you know. You're
yeah,
trying to bring people in by presenting the complexity. You don't want to completely tell them only things that they know. You don't want to think, but you do it gently, and so that's a different skill. So, um, and always chess has been something slightly esoteric. It's on average, in the public realm, you will meet more non-chess players than you will meet chess players. That's simple, quite a simple. I mean, we are not football. So, um, and then, if you talk down to people, you get irritated if they will ask very simple, basic questions of chess, and you do have to learn how to explain it a bit slowly. Sometimes even repeating yourself over and over. I mean, you know the answers, but you say them slowly and so on.
and
But it's a part of, I think any complex technical field, you need to have that ability to talk about it evenly. I mean, you
yeah.
don't have to like it, but you should know how to do it.
And I mean, a lot of person who are listening to my channel, they are also very not patient with other people. They are always, they already know what other people will say, even that they didn't finish the sentence. So what would you recommend to those people, how to learn to be more patient with other people who are not thinking in this fast way like they do?
Um, my my own experience was that you try to stay focused on the common conversation, even if you think you know how it's going to end. And at the end, you say something very simple. You give the answer in a simple way, and you move on. That's just social etiquette. Equally, when I ask someone in some other specialized field about their field, I know that I'm not able to follow their explanations very easily. They say things automatically because any expert, by definition, can do this much faster.
Yeah.
So then it's very easy for me if I've had the conversation on the other side. So if I ask someone about technology or another sport and so on, they're going to explain it in a way, but they will tend to speak fast because they think you know a lot. Then you tell yourself, well, in that field, how did I feel? Now let's invert it. How do I solve this problem? It's a good skill to learn because every once in a while, um, another problem when you speak fast is you might actually overlook something yourself. This is not necessarily you having a conversation with someone who's not an expert. Is that if you keep summarizing things faster and faster, the brain gets lazy. It um, overlooks some things in the hurry to answer the question, and then you might miss something. Now, I'm not saying you have to slow down and explain things in every conversation you have, but be polite. Don't forget your social graces, and just think if you asked a question in some other field in which you're a novice, how would you like to be spoken to? Something like that, and I moderate it like that.
Yeah. And if you think back into your life, what do you think, which person was the most important person who who motivated you also to get this profession, what you did then?
I think my mother was the biggest influence because she accompanied me to chess tournaments many times. Um, and because by then my elder brother and sister had already left home and gone to university and so on, uh, she was more or less stuck with me all the time, and so she played a very big role in my chess. Probably I would not have been a chess player in the end if it hadn't been for her.
Wow.
I mean, I can describe in many ways. I'll tell one story, which is that when we were in the Philippines for 1 year because my father had a posting there. My father was working in the railways, and he had a posting there. And then there used to be a chess program on television, but because I was in school at that time, my mother would write down everything they said, including the explanations for the game. And then when I came back, she would show me the game with the explanation so that I would understand. I mean, that kind of commitment and so on. And beyond that, I think quite a few people. I can single out my wife, who, since our marriage, she has been heavily involved in my chess. And I think a lot of the high points in my career I wouldn't have achieved without her. But also many other people. I mean, my siblings, my lots of friends. You get a lot of help in life.
Yeah,
It's something to be grateful for.
cool. I mean, of course, a lot of people are important in our life, but sometimes it's really one simple person who is the most important person. And many neurodivergent people often feel different. What would you say to such people about their way of thinking?
I don't think it's for me to say. I think a person who is absorbed in some hobby, and in fact, it's one of the great joys of life. If there's something which engages your brain, and especially with neurodivergent people, you can see what their field, their passion means to them. They they are thinking about something, and they can be completely lost in it for hours.
Yes.
And this is a great joy because actually we have a lot of hours to fill in a day, and quite often we don't know what to do with them. So these people who can think about a problem or try to solve it, and can't rest till they solve it, who they it's a very nice life skill. So there's nothing to apologize for, but you will have to learn how to manage in social situations. As I said, not everyone is like you, and you have to learn to adapt. But I think life will force them to adapt as much as they need. I mean, if they meet someone every Monday, then they learn to adapt every Monday. If they meet them 4 times a week, they will have to do it more often. And if they don't meet them at all, then maybe they don't need to do it. So I but I think each case it's a sort of learning experience. I do have this problem that sometimes I'm thinking about a chess position, so I'm thinking the chess position, and someone might be talking to me, and I'm taking in the words and they're putting them somewhere, but I'm not able to process what they're saying in any way. And in fact, my wife spotted this, and so when we got married, she'd always say, "You looks like you're listening to me, but you're not," and something like that. So, and but I can't help it. I mean, I've learned to not do it, and so sometimes and nowadays in such a situation, I stop the chess, I park it and listen to somebody. I mean, I wouldn't say I enjoy it, but I force myself to listen to somebody for 2 minutes, hoping that it'll be over soon because I can't keep this up much longer. And
Yeah.
then I can even force my brain to remember what a few things that they said. If I can quickly note down a few points,
Yeah.
or make a mental note, this is what they said, and then I can stop and then I can go back to my chess. So these are coping methods, and but it's true. I think people who have an ability to engage on one subject a lot, it's something they have to cope with.
Yeah. What do you think, how can one learn to see one's own way of thinking, not as a weakness, but as a style?
Um, I think you're stuck with it. So you accept it as just a trait. It's
Yeah.
something like I cannot change this, because in chess there are many areas I've tried to improve in. But after 5 or 6 years of not making any progress, I've come to the conclusion. Well, maybe I'm not going to improve on it. Let me focus on what I do well.
Yeah.
But let me be aware that I'm not as good in this area as I would like to be,
Yeah.
which means that when my game is heading towards that such an area, then I know at least to warn myself, hey, now I must be careful because I'm not good in this area. So if you can't improve everywhere, you should at least have self-awareness,
Self-awareness. I mean,
and
in
that's
everything.
critical. But you can see the self-awareness. It's I know that you may not be able to always have the greatest conversation, but at least if I'm self-aware of that, then I know that I've got to put a little bit of mental effort uh, to come out of it okay. Can be even more stubborn and frustrating than we would like.
Yeah. So it was really interesting with you. I think it's okay if I have some other questions, I will send you an email. If you have time to answer it, it would be very nice. So was very nice to meet you.
Thank
And
you.
if you have any things to say to new divergent people, I'm always open about your ideas how to better deal with new diversity.
Um, I tend to think of it as just a trait rather than some extreme condition. And in most cases, I mean, I think there's a scale, and it's only maybe one or two exceptions for whom it's a problem. Otherwise, it's not like there are the category of people who are struggling with life or anything. It's just it's a certain way of looking at it, and our world is diverse enough. But nonetheless, they are fascinating people to talk to in every area.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Thank you very much, Vichy.
Thank you, Alice.
So I wish you a very nice evening.
And I wish you a speedy recovery.
Well, in fact, in your time, it's not evening at the moment. You're in America, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So I wish you a good afternoon.
Yes, thank you.